Hey, this is a lecture video for chapter 5, repetition structures, or how I call them loops. So what the loop essentially is, it's the same thing as a decision structure, but instead of completing the code that's inside the decision structure once, we keep going until our condition is true. And you'll see that in a little bit. So there are different types of loops, and some programming languages have more types, some have less types, but these are the general loops that you have to be familiar with. The most popular one is the while loop. So while our condition is true, do something with the code, okay? Then there is a do while loop, do some task while the condition is true. So we're gonna do something and then we're gonna check the condition. And the do some task while the condition is false, or until it becomes true. So with all the loops, the main thing that we do not want to do is to create an infinite loop. You know how people say, oh, you're stuck in a loop. We do not want that because our program will crash, your computer will crash. It's just a bad scenario overall. So this is what a while loop looks like. We call it a pretest loop because none of the code that's in the statements right here, none of this code will be executed until our condition is true. Okay, so the first thing that we do, these are different lines of code. We come in here, computer looks at this statement while some condition, right? While, for example, it's raining outside. While it's raining outside, do not go for a walk. Let's do it like this. An example. While our condition is it's raining outside, and our statement would be to go for a walk. So while it's raining outside, do not go for a walk, right? So what we were going to do, we're going to come in here, we're going to check, is it raining? We're going to check our condition first. We're going to look outside and see, is it raining? And if it's not raining, then we're going to go for a walk. So a do while loop is a post-test loop. So what it means is that we're going to do something first. You see here, there are no conditions. There's nothing for us to check. So we're going to do something with the code, with our program, and then we're going to check the condition. So the difference between these two is that this one checks the condition first. Just remember that. A while loop checks a condition first. Do loop does something and then checks the condition. And do until loop, it's a little bit of a weird loop. Python doesn't have it. A lot of programming languages do not have this loop, but basically it iterates until your condition is true. So it's the opposite of a do loop. And what I mean by the opposite, so it's gonna check if the condition is false. Because here, we check if the condition is true, right? Because it's just a simple while loop. But this one is gonna check so the condition is false. So we also have a count controlled loops. These are my favorite kind of loops because they're so simple and so easy to write. So a for loop, we call this a for loop. So whenever you have to execute a loop a certain amount of times, you're going to use a counter loop because you can strictly set up this loop for example, if you want this loop to iterate 7 times, you can do that. 12, 13, 14. If there's a certain number in your head, this is a for loop. This is when you're going to use a for loop. So you see, for counter variable that equals from starting value to max value. So what it means, and I have an example right here. So what we're going to do, we're going to begin our code. Then we have a variable that equals to 1 right here, count equals 1. And our loop will go until count is less than or equals to 10. All right, so for each number in the range from 1 to 10. 1 to 10. As you can see here, including the 10. So what does this loop do? While this condition is true, count is less than or equal to 10, we're going to output what our variable count, and then we're going to add 1 to it. So what is the output of this program? Let's see. Count equals 1. Is count less than or equal to 10? Yes. So we follow this arrow, output count. We print 1. And then we add 1 to the count. And then we go back. Just follow the arrows. And then we go back. So now our count is 2 because we added 1 to it. It's still less than or equal to 10. So we're going to output count. And same thing. And same thing will happen for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But at 10, we're still making this condition true. So output count, then count equals 10 plus 1 is 11. We go back, we check our condition. Is 11 less than 10? No, 11 is more than 10. So this condition is false, and then we just exit the loop. We end it. Okay, so some concerns about loops. Do not forget to initialize the control variable if you're using a for loop. Do not forget to modify the control variable to not create a infinite loop. And use your while loop when the loop may not have to process. Then use do while when it must process at least once, because remember the do while loop, it processes the code first and then it checks the condition. And use your for loop with specific number of iteration. If you know how many times your loop should run, use a for loop.